Let's start with this clip of you. Actually, you were at the I don't know, is this at I guess at the White House in the press
State
pool,
Department.
State Department press pool, talking to State Department spokesperson Mark Miller about basically the broad question. South Africa is taking Israel to the International Court of Justice with charges of genocide. Emma interviewed a
human rights lawyer yesterday who's won in front of Francis Boyle. You may have seen his recent appearance on Democracy Now! Where he said something similar, where he believes, based on his reading of the case put forward by South Africa, he says it's very well researched and thorough, and he believes that within the next week or so that Israel will be found to have been, or will lose their case, and that the United Nations may have to move forward with them having committed crimes of genocide.
I was on Democracy Now! Right after him, so I captively watched that interview. I had no choice, but it was a very good interview. Yeah,
well, he's
Emma
great.
did even better job yesterday.
No doubt she did.
All right, but let's look at your question of Miller.
And to follow up on Turkey, I'm sure you've seen Turkey has joined South Africa in its charging Israel with genocide before the International Court of Justice. Is there any concern within the State Department that State Department officials could be roped into this prosecution?
No, I will say that as it relates to the State Department, we have been committed to addressing the humanitarian situation in Gaza and have made a priority of preventing, as I just said in response to your question, the displacement of Palestinians. I will also say, though, that genocide is, of course, a heinous atrocity, one of the most heinous atrocities that any individual can commit. Those are allegations that should not be made lightly, and as it pertains to the United States, we are not seeing any acts that constitute genocide.
And finally, over the break, top authorities in the Armenian quarter expressed deep concern that the Israeli government was using the conflict in Gaza to push out a lot of Armenian Christians from the Armenian quarter. Any response?
So no specific response to that, but as we have said on a number of occasions, we do not want to see the government of Israel take any steps that would escalate tensions. Go ahead.
Now, I notice he doesn't follow up that with, and if we do, or now that we are, there's nothing else after that. It is, and, you know, it's quite clear that we have not exercised any leverage whatsoever. So we can't test the theory as to whether the U.S. could influence Israel with its, you know, to actually not do the things that we supposedly want them not to do. Increasingly, it's harder to accept that we don't want them to do this really with any type of energy if we're not going to do anything about it.
And nor have they conducted, and this is, I think, your question sparked this Political report. If I were to guess, Ryan, that the U.S. has not formally assessed if Israel is violating human rights. So that's an admission in Politico that even though they say they're not committing genocide, they've done zero formal review of it.
That's right. Yeah. That after that question, there were a number of other reporters who picked up on kind of some newsworthy nuggets that he dropped there, as that you pointed out, to follow up on. Well, wait a minute. You've determined that there's no act, so that means there was a process that led to a determination. Can you tell us about that process? And eventually it got to that point. But yeah, I thought his answer was interesting because it's like, okay, what's your culpability? You know, what's your exposure in this war crimes prosecution? And the answer was, we have told them not, you know, to take care of the humanitarian situation and to do everything you can to reduce civilian casualties. So, like, therefore, you know, we are not exposed. Like that was basically his answer. But if you think about it in a more common sense kind of way, it's like, all right, somebody comes to you and they're like, hey, I'm going to go rob this 7-Eleven. Can I have a gun? You know, you should not rob that 7-Eleven. That would be inappropriate. But yeah, here's the gun. Right. And then they go in, they rob the 7-Eleven, they shoot the clerk, they come back out, and they're like, I'm going to go rob another 7-Eleven, but I'm out of bullets. Like, well, I really think it's a bad idea to rob the second 7-Eleven. Like, you should definitely not do that.
We don't want to see it.
And take care next time to like just rob the till. You don't have to shoot the clerk. And they're like, I think we're gonna shoot the clerk. So can I have some bullets? And you're like, here are some bullets, but do not do this. Like, it's a really bad idea. We really would encourage you not to do this. And then they go in and rob the second 7-Eleven and kill that clerk too. It doesn't seem to me like if that person gets arrested, that the person would get off. Like, just sitting in the back seat of a car when you don't even know the guy is going to rob a 7-Eleven has people sitting in prison today. But like actually handing them the bullets and the gun to do it, I don't think you get out of jail just by suggesting that they, act a little more responsibly if they keep coming back for more and continue to not act responsibly.
Do you think Miller's response that this is not something to be accused or making accusation lightly or frivolously, do you think that is the nascent effort to begin to delegitimize the result of this tribunal, I guess, case, in the event that it does come back like, yeah, there is an attempted genocide going on, or a genocide, or ethnic cleansing, or something that is, sort of a substantial charge that I think sort of like validates what people are seeing with their own eyes.
I think they're going to throw a lot against the wall between now and a verdict. And you're seeing Kirby do it a little differently. And I thought it was interesting, the daylight between Miller's response and later in the press briefing, Miller said, a reporter asked, well, what do you think of South Africa? Have you talked to them about, what do you think of the fact that they pursued these charges? And he said, well, we don't think it's a productive step. And left it at that. Kirby, meanwhile, is like, just, furious. Like, this is meritless. It's baseless. It's without any basis in fact. It's slanderous. It's like, he's doing the like aggressive, like full on rebuttal to it. So it feels like there's a lot of different kind of responses that are being tested out, but it is a real risk. As Emma, from your interview with Francis, like,
certainly
it's not a totally toothless
I would argue it's not totally. I mean, well, it's not totally toothless in terms of like the culpability, right? As you say, I wish it had more teeth. But in terms of the cases being presented by South Africa, hundreds of footnotes. The case is laid out quite clearly. And when I spoke to Francis yesterday, he went through the different planks of what constitutes genocide in international law, and also use his experience in arguing on behalf of victims of genocide in order to frame the conversation, and said how Israel exceeds many of what he successfully argued in front of the ICJ in terms of their crimes in death tolls, in maiming, in stated intent, as well as the case that's being brought by South Africa is much more robust than what he said even he was able to present during his time, I think it was with Bosnia, in his case in front of the ICJ, because it has more people working on it, and the footnotes and the evidence and the stated intent by Israeli officials in public, blatantly, is so obvious that, like, we'll see how the process plays out, but the United States is in some scary territory here, and I think it really exemplifies the arrogance of kind of an old guard of people in the foreign policy apparatus that see the United States hegemonic role in the world as immutable and as unchanging because of like because of American might, and how they're really underestimating, I would say, how quickly the world is turning on the United States and Israel, even though it's borne out in just like the numbers in the United Nations.
Right. And where do they think that this goes afterwards? They keep talking about, the day after for Gaza. And from that perspective, it seems to be only the Israeli government that has a real plan for the day after for Gaza, a plan that the kind of U.S. policymakers keep pretending is not their plan. But what about the day after, for Israel? There was actually a piece on Haaretz this morning talking about how the Israeli public is living in a kind of fantasy land constructed by Channel 12 and the IDF propaganda that is keeping them from having any idea of what's actually going on the ground in Gaza, and also having any idea about what's going on in the rest of the world as it relates to public opinion about what Israel's doing. And their argument is that at the day after, Israel is going to be extremely isolated and in a difficult geopolitical situation, which will be made worse when if there is an International Court of Justice verdict that people can point to, because the entire effort to undermine the BDS movement by calling it anti-Semitic and a double standard is really blown apart by a verdict that you could point to at the ICJ.
I think this is a point that people need to really understand. Gideon Levy, the sort of famed Israeli journalist, has said the same thing. He's said, like, the Israeli population has absolutely no idea what's going on in Gaza. They're completely and in a moment, maybe we'll play this clip of that I saw on your Twitter feed of some students, essentially, I mean, not attacking their principal, but like chastising their principal for introducing the idea of what is going on in Gaza. But this is, I mean, people should understand this, and this is frankly something that I had predicted, I don't know, 10 years ago, that we're going to get to a point where Israel is going to become increasingly isolated. And Biden is, it seems to me, at least within the Democratic Party, but possibly across American politics, the high watermark in terms of completely unconditioned support for Israel. And it also seems unsustainable to me when the Biden administration had issued an assessment of the Russian war crimes within literally like 4 weeks, I think, of its invasion of Ukraine. And now, 2 months into this, 3 months into this now, has made no assessment. They don't want to see what's there. Eventually, this assessment is going to have to be made. It may be accelerated by this court case, but we are at the high watermark, it seems to me, of support for Israel. And there is no way that it is going to increase from here, because even if this was to end tomorrow, we're never going to get to this level where people can justify what's gone on more. But as we start to see what's under the rubble, as in the event that this becomes even more, involving Lebanon, or we assassinate somebody in Iraq, the attack in Syria, Israel's attack in Beirut. I mean, it can only get worse from Israel.